And happy Friday. We have met yesterday and on Wednesday, and with these two different lives, we talked about the services of the retail industry, and we've talked about unified commerce. And today's live is going to be concentrated on data and the importance of data in today's retail environment and decision making. Of course, most of us are scared of data, and I'm the first one who's scared. But it's really important for us to understand the value of data that we're collecting online and how it could influence our decisions, or maybe how it could help us into taking better or informed decision making related to our brand. Small, medium-sized, or bigger brands need data today, and Caila is going to give us all the answers related to that. She's going to help us understand the term data, demystify it, hopefully, and give us more insights on how to use data to make the best out of it. So I'm joining Caila to start and kick off this beautiful conversation. Connections are good. Hi
Hello.
there. Good morning.
Good morning or good afternoon.
It's good afternoon for me and good morning for you. And I just looked out of the window and it's like pouring.
Oh
It's so
no.
depressing. And I see that that you're taking pictures and it's sunny and you're wearing dresses. I envy you.
I know. I live in South Carolina, so it's hot, it's sunny, and feel very blessed to live here for sure.
Caila, thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for accepting to do this live. I'm really honored to just be talking to you today and to be exchanging about this beautiful topic, which is not my area of expertise, but still influences a lot the areas that I'm working with. However, let's concentrate today on data and the importance of data, and how you came across working with data. I mean, most people see that some men are more like interested in working with data, right? And how did you come across this industry, and why the interest today in this industry?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be featured on your page, so I am so thankful that you reached out and asked to chat. How I came into this, so it's a very interesting, well, I guess interesting. I was originally wanted to be a doctor for the longest time, my entire life. I went to college to be I was going to go to medical school. And then at some point I was just decided that that wasn't for me. So I switched paths, and very early on in my career, I realized that I was really good with data. It, which sounds kind of silly to say, but I really enjoyed sitting down with a large data set, analyzing it, the attention to detail that it required just spoke to me. And so I really embraced that. And once I did that, all these doors started opening for me. So I had originally started off my career in biomedical companies, and then I switched over to tech. So I started at a company called Demandware about 7 years ago. And this company, e-commerce platform, and ended up getting acquired by Salesforce. So that's how I came into the Salesforce world. And at Demandware, I started off looking at marketing operations, campaign attribution, figuring out how we could build a model for reporting on all this marketing activity that we were doing. And then
Yeah.
from there, it just kind of naturally transitioned into working on consumer insights. And so we're collecting all of this data off of our e-commerce platform, And so we are harnessing all of that data to come up with some pretty cool content and analytics. And yeah, so that's how it happened. It was very organic.
Okay, and very natural, but yes, like it's really scary again thinking about all of these sheets, and I see numbers like up and down. But it's really interesting how you put it that we could just to start with differentiate between types of data, right? Like data could be very unclean and cluttered at the beginning, but then we clean it up and reduce it to make more sense to our decision making. And what we're going to be talking today is more of this data that could make sense to brands in relation to their consumers, right?
Exactly.
So let's kick off with that. And let's just answer this simple question: why is data important in today's retail environment?
Oh, it's such a good question. And if you couldn't tell, I love data. But, um, it, so I think it's important to understand that in our everyday lives, we are generating data, whether we know it or not. So every action that I take or that happens around me is a potential data point.
Yeah.
But the only way that we can actually see that data is if we start collecting it, right? So that's the initial point, is starting to collect that data. And then, like you said, once you have that collected data, how do you organize it? So then you must organize it, and then you have to think about, okay, once I organize it, what do I want to learn? What are my learnings, and how am I going to use this data? So I think those are all really important things to think about. In retail specifically, there's so many actions that consumers are taking, especially today. When we look at, the old retail, or the old way of, at the very, or even pre-digital, or at the very early stages of digital, retail was mostly a one-to-one relationship, right? The retailer owned that relationship with the customer. You walk into the store, you have an experience, an exchange, and you walk out either with a product or without a product. But today, because of digital and social media and all of these new channels and devices, that relationship is so dispersed, right? Across so many different touch points. And so it's now so much more important for the retailer to take ownership of that relationship again, to understand where their consumer is spending their time, and how they're interacting, and what are their preferences. And so the only way that we can do that today now is with this data that's being collected out there. So there's data being collected all over the internet. How do we make sense of that? How do we merge that with our own data, right? Our first party data, what we do know about our customer. And so in this incredibly digital world, harnessing that data is going to be critical to understanding your customer.
Yeah. And I just want to ask a question. Sometimes we're looking at all of this data that is available to us, and we're just picking that which is most relevant to our business and analyzing it. However, on the other hand, we might think of collecting our own data to serve a certain and a specific purpose, right? Is there a difference of value between the first, like second-hand data, and the other primary data collection? Here again, this is like the basic, maybe traditional data collection method, but does it apply in today's online, highly digitalized world?
It's actually a really interesting question that you just brought up, because I would say that prior to maybe 2020, that second party data, that third party data, incredibly important, right? That's how you're going to leverage the power of digital marketing and digital advertising. But we're actually in an interesting period in the evolution of the internet, because we're seeing that all of these internet providers like Google and Apple and all these website providers are now limiting cookie tracking,
Yes.
So
Right.
we're moving into this idea of this cookieless world, and what does that mean? How do you like reach consumers? And so it's actually what I believe it's going to do is it's going to put an increased focus on the value of first party data, which is data that you collect directly from your customer.
Right.
And you know, we know that this data is even these initiatives are even going to restrict that second party data, so the data that you would get off of social media platforms. So I think in light of that, it puts even more focus on developing that relationship with your customer.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
you know,
True.
and in spite of it, in light of that, thinking about how you're going to get access to all of these different data sets that you have, right? So you have your website, you have your store, which has a POS system, which, you know, might have an order management system. You know, how then are you going to pick the tools that allow you to create that single view of your customer so that you can actually leverage the power of your first party data? And I think there's real opportunity here. I don't think this is a negative. I think this is a positive. I think that it allows the retailers, or it gives the retailers an excuse to say, you know what, I'm going to take ownership of, I'm going to take back ownership of these relationships with my customer.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I think you're going to see the value of loyalty programs start to increase. And I just think it's exciting.
Right. And does it complicate things when we're thinking of all of this data collection when it comes in a sort of a unified commerce context? I mean, would there be a difference in terms of the value of data that we collect from our offline store, our temporary store, and then our website, and then our social sites? Because hopefully we would be analyzing our target consumer, but does he or she behave the same way across all platforms?
You know, that's a great question. I think it really depends on your audience, right? So I think, and when we look at generational data, I think this is like the difference between how different age generations interact. It's very interesting because the older generations behave very similarly across channels. I would say they're more set in their ways.
Yeah.
But the younger the generation skews, we're seeing a lot more diversity in how they're engaging, the ways in which they're engaging, their preferences, even amongst the generation themselves. There's so many differing, you know, opinions and values, and so I think that especially as the Gen Z population becomes more of a consumer and gains more consuming power, it's going to be even more critical to understand how they behave across those channels because they're so diverse in
Yeah.
their thinking. And that's going to make it a lot more challenging, I think, for retailers.
Yeah, exactly. Like we need to analyze at all times and understand the data source, and their vision or projection on our product, our service, etc. And every time we think about technology, we have this idea that things are getting easier, but I believe that things are getting more complicated. It's good, it's creating new jobs, but oh my God, I mean, every time I think about data, you know, I turn red. It's not my thing. and, and sometimes when they ask me, when we do research, we have to work like with both qualitative and quantitative data. I mean,
Yeah.
I like to see some data, but at a certain point when the chart becomes like very big and very long and very wide, that's good. So, Kyla, in this turbulent context, I believe that we can affirm that the role of data is becoming more important.
Mhm.
However, not everyone, I believe, not every brand in every size or every company could access data or could access quality data that it could be beneficial. So this is, I believe, where you really come in and tell us how we could benefit from data at any size, whether we are very small or bigger companies.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Everyone should be using data. And I think smaller retailers in particular, I think it's a little intimidating, right? Because you think data, do I need to have a data scientist or a data analyst on my staff? Where do I even begin? But I think what's exciting about today is there's so many business user tools that allow the business user, not necessarily an engineer, to structure and analyze data in a much easier format or a much easier way. So I think that's what's exciting. For a smaller retailer, I think it's going to be all about picking the right tools. So when you're picking tools for your store, your POS system, you want to pick a tool that is going to integrate with your website. You're going to want to pick a website platform that's going to integrate with your store and your social media and allow you to, have one system of record that allows you to have that holistic view. And once you have that, you're immediately collecting data regardless.
Yeah.
And so then that tool is going to help you, the business user, the business owner. It's going to automatically structure a lot of that data for you, which is the good news.
So the good news is we have the ability to get structured data, but do we all know how to read it?
That's a great question. I think that you absolutely have to educate yourself, whether you're, the business owner or the business user. I think you have to figure out what the goals are for your company. What are your pain points, right? So what are you struggling with right now? If it's conversions, right? So say you're looking at your conversion rates and they're low. What are the possible reasons why those conversion rates could be low? Where is the consumer dropping off the sales funnel? Are you getting too much traffic, but it's not the right kind of traffic? So looking at the traffic that's coming in, where it's coming in from, is that driving down your conversion rate? Are you segmenting your audience correctly? So I think that it's important to, when you're analyzing the data and you're looking at one particular data point, and I'm just going to pick on conversion rate, you can't just look at conversion rate. You have to look at all of the things that feed into that to really understand.
Yeah.
So first, the first part of conversion is looking at that traffic. Like I said, if that traffic is really quality traffic, after you've done that analysis, now we have to look at, why aren't they actually placing the order? So is my checkout process really cumbersome? Does most of my traffic come from a mobile phone? And is my mobile checkout optimized? Do I have Apple Pay or Google Pay or PayPal? Those types of questions. So I think it's important to think when we are looking at data, we have to use the data to ask more questions.
Right.
And that's where the value comes. And so when you look at the data, you identify, okay, so here's my problem. I want more sales. How do I get more sales? So I'm going to look at all of these sales metrics and I'm going to dive down deeper into each metric. That's at least the way my brain works.
So we're saying it's not like taking the data per verbatim. We have to recontextualize it. And we have to reroute or relive, I think, the customer journey to see what's going wrong or what is right. And then either optimize, either change based on what we have, right?
Exactly.
So it means that retailers have to always be very active and reactive towards the data that they're receiving to make the best out of it.
Exactly.
Right. Kayla, let's take this little question here. And because we're going to talk about social media as well as a platform that feeds all of our data, is there a
Yeah.
relationship between a brand's website analysis and decision making that are going to be taken on social media sites? So basically, if a brand has this website and social media sites, how do we take decisions from the data collected on one to optimize, I believe, the other formats or touch points that we have?
Yeah, I think we can look at our website and say, I think this is where potentially A/B testing could come in really handy.
Mm,
Um, because you can look at the difference between, the consumer behavior. And I think you can interaction or engagement on the website is actually going to be a really clear indicator of what your consumer values or what your audience values.
right.
And so, how they're engaging with your content on your website. Are they spending more time looking at pictures? Are they reading reviews? Um, looking at that product detail page, where do they scroll to? When do they leave? And then at that point, you can figure out what types of content are keeping my audience most engaged. And then using those insights to influence your social media strategy. So
Right.
if your audience loves to see your product on real people, right? They want to see influencers using your product. They want to see other people in real life, how they're engaging with your product. Then I would say you can easily tell that from your website based on, right, how many images they click. If you have user generated content embedded in your page, do they engage with that user generated content? Those are easy questions that you can ask and answer, and then use that to inform your social media strategy. I think also seeing where your audience is coming from, right? So analyzing your traffic. We know that the younger generation, Gen Z, they're skewing more to alternative platforms. So Twitch, Snapchat, TikTok, they're coming from very diverse channels. We're seeing gaming as being like
Yeah.
a new and exciting channel for them. If your audience skews older, they might be gravitating more towards Facebook and email. So that is also really valuable information, because then you could say, okay, I'm going to put my budget, my marketing, my ad spend budget into these channels or these platforms, and I'm going to either, I know that my audience really values, influencer marketing. So I'm going to engage in influencer marketing, or I'm going to pull back from that. I think those are the types of insights you could leverage. I
Right.
hope that
Okay.
answers the question.
Yeah. And anyway, if the viewer is listening or still with us, if they have questions, they will get back to us. But the second question would be, and I'm intrigued, sometimes we have like a couple of platforms or touch points from which we collect data. And this gives us enough information to act on, enhance, etc. But
Yeah.
if we're restricted to that, are we missing out on opportunity from other platforms that could also be interesting to our customers? I mean, when we're talking about this data, do we always concentrate on the inputs that we have from what we have, or should brands also go and explore or be a little bit brave into going into decision making that is not related directly to the data they've analyzed? I don't know if it makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I think so. What I do specifically for my role at Salesforce is analyzing macro trends. So I am um, collecting data across thousands of websites, right? And thousands of different sectors and countries, and looking at that on a very macro level. And I think that that's where the value is, right? You have your website and you can look at your performance, you can benchmark your performance, but how does your performance compare to the industry, to your competitors, to your peers? I think that's where there's a lot of value in looking outside of yourself and seeing where those opportunities lie. In particular, for example, if I'm a beauty brand and I look at my social media traffic and I say, okay, 10% of all of my website traffic is being driven by social media. I think that's really good. But if I have nothing to compare that to, right, then I don't know if that's good or if it's bad. So having that basis of comparison, if I have that comparison, say, oh, actually, the beauty industry sees about 20% of traffic coming from social media. So maybe I need to be putting more investment into my social platforms. And so that's where I think the value lies. But again, we talked about the role of first party data, and moving into this cookieless world is going to be more important. But I absolutely think that we can be looking outside of ourselves for that benchmarking, but also to enrich our first party data, right? So other data can we pull in to enrich this data source and derive even more interesting findings to help drive better decision making?
Right. Thank you. Very interesting. Let's take this question. What are the best ways to generate traffic to a website?
That's a great question. I don't think there's any one way. I don't think there's a silver bullet, right? I think it's a combination of things. Like it's email marketing, it's digital marketing, it's social, it's new things that are popping up, right? So gaming and live streaming and social advertising. So I don't know if you could say there's any one way. I think that historically the best way, the most traffic typically comes organically or through digital advertising. I know that email marketing is also a very successful way to generate traffic. But then again, we're seeing patterns shift as these younger generations gain more buying power, more consumer power. They're dispersed across a lot more channels. So I think we're going to see that change over the next few years as that Gen Z population grows a little bit older, and also as the younger Gen Zers, because the youngest Gen Zer is about 6 years old right now, so they're still babies. they're still developing their wants and tastes and likes, and so this generation is going to be incredibly diverse.
And powerful.
Yeah.
I can see you thinking maybe of your children.
Yeah.
So I can see the thoughts like already gathering.
I think they're Generation Alpha.
Let's take another question, Caila. So what's the impact of iOS 14 update on the data, and do you think it will have a huge effect on campaigns?
Yes. So this is going to be a big one. So I know that at least what I heard is that a lot of the initial plans to roll out the iOS 14 update have sort of been pulled back a little bit. So they're not moving everyone over at once. It's going to happen like in a phased outlook. So I think we're going to have a little bit more time. But regardless, I think it comes back to this re-emphasis now on gathering that first party data. So I think as a brand, you're going to have to really rely on your efforts to collect data directly from your customers. I think really great ways to do that are through loyalty programs, email marketing, or SMS marketing. I believe the open rate for SMS messages is something like 90% or something wild. So thinking about those ways to opt in your customers to collect data directly from them, I think that's going to be the natural evolution of where this is all going. GDPR is here. We're seeing privacy laws getting enacted, starting in the US. So I think we have to just embrace this and figure out where that opportunity lies. It's going to make, you know, social advertising more expensive, right? Because it's going to be less targeted. So you're going to have to rethink your marketing spend. Where are you going to budget your spend? If social media is still really important for your brand, then maybe you're putting more money into your social media and less into you know, your digital advertising. If you know, I think again, it's going to come down to more focus on those natural and organic ways to interact directly with that end user. And potentially, you know, put more emphasis on what happens after that sale, right? So retaining that customer, building that loyalty. Customer acquisition is so expensive, even before this cookieless world, right?
Right.
So how do we cultivate those relationships after the sale, keep those customers, and build that relationship, that journey? The journey doesn't end after the sale. In my opinion, the journey just begins. So exactly. So how do we leverage that, and how do we grow that relationship?
Right. Which I mean, a lot of questions to raise, and it makes us think again that amidst this digital explosion, we're going back to the essence of retail, which is a lot of one-on-one, and a lot of going directly and speaking with your consumers. And speaking of which, I'm curious to know about the qualitative data collection. I know that when we're talking about data today, it's like numbers or maybe percentages or performances that we could measure. However, we have a lot of important unmeasurable data, which is qualitative. And we see that most of the brands today are doing lots of efforts, physical retail efforts, maybe such as pop-up stores or temporary stores, or going to, I don't know, doing stalls or stands and concerts to meet with their customers directly and in person and collect this hot qualitative data. Once we have that, how do we act on this type of data?
So is the question, how do we collect and act, or just how do we act?
How do we act?
Yeah, so I think that, you know, when we first started doing this, our work as Salesforce to understand the consumer, we were initially looking just at quantitative data. So what are consumers doing online? And that's very interesting, right? But it doesn't tell you like the why. We can see what consumers are doing, but really, like, what's the motivation behind these actions, these decisions? And so we started doing performing, in addition to the platform analysis and online behavior analysis that we're doing, consumer surveys to understand, you know, what's really driving, what are the thought processes driving these decisions? What's that real qualitative motivator or qualitative data. And so we started collecting that data, and it actually really enriched our understanding of the quantitative data. Right? So it was interesting. And I think the most obvious example that I can think of right now is in the pandemic, we saw social usage just skyrocket, right? Which makes a lot of sense. You can't go to the store, the physical store. You need inspiration. You're sitting at home, you're scrolling your social feed. So we saw a lot more e-commerce activity coming from social referrals. But what was interesting was that we saw tablet traffic from social referrals just like, you know, the grass is
skyrocketing.
Like yeah, but then all of a sudden tablet just starts going like that. We're like, what's going on here? So our hypothesis, right, is that, okay, tablet traffic skews older. Could the older generations be using social media more? Especially since the older generations are more at risk of COVID-related complications. They're more likely to be more cautious and be using alternative means to discover products and brands. And so that was our hypothesis. And we did in our Q1 survey that we, Q1 2021 survey, we asked, over the past year, have you used social media or has social media influenced you to make a purchase? And obviously, you know, among the millennials and the Gen Zs, it was like, yeah, you know, 75% of them. But what was really interesting is that I believe the number is like 50 something, 54% of baby boomers either directly purchased a product from social media or were influenced from social media
Wow.
over the last year, which is really,
Yeah.
really interesting. So we
Yeah.
wouldn't have those insights. We wouldn't know that. And so if I were a brand, right, looking at that data, that my audience skews older. Before COVID, I probably wouldn't have thought a lot about investing in social media because that's not, you know, prior to COVID, everyone was like, yeah, Gen Zs and millennials. But now we're seeing this older generation is also influenced by social media. So now every company needs to be thinking about their social media strategy. So if I were the CEO of a brand that skewed older, I would absolutely be thinking about, okay, how do we tap into this? How do we build out our social media arm, or how do we, you know, what do we care about in that, or what does our customer care about within social media, and how do we leverage that? So that's just an example of how we use quantitative and qualitative to prove a hypothesis, or at least
Yeah.
help prove a hypothesis, and then hopefully help brands make decisions around that. So
Right.
you know, so yeah, I hope that answers the question.
It does. Thank you. I'm raising like all of these things that I have on top of my mind because it's a very wide topic, but I mean it's nice to understand all of these. Now in this data-driven world, I believe that we are all understanding that in a way or another as businesses, even if we're working on our own, even if we're blogging, even if we're selling our own, products, we need some kind of data. So let's start giving some suggestions to retailers to how to set their businesses right, to collect the best data, even if minimal, and to help them make better decisions related to their business practices.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think it really comes down to picking the right tools for your business, being very strategic about that. I think that's absolutely step one. That's critical. Once you have the right tools, and when I say the right tools, I'm saying technologies and that you are going to help your business be customer centric. I think it's incredibly important that we're thinking in modern retail about how we put the customer first and thinking from the mind of the customer, and what your customer values. So I think you have to pick tools that are going to allow you to do that.
Are
Tools
we
that are going
allowed to give like some preferences of tools or aren't? I don't want to
well,
be fishing. I know sometimes it's better to be discreet if you wish. Okay, we'll stay discreet on that.
I work for Salesforce, so Salesforce is the number one
Yeah.
customer relationship management tool.
Okay.
But
Because I feel like I know that everyone will be curious. Okay, Ralia, just like drop the question.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
And so,
there are so many
yeah,
great tools out there. I think it's important to pick a tool with a great ecosystem, right? Because not one tool is going to do everything for you. So you want to
yeah.
pick tools that are able to be integrated together and work together. And then I think once you have that set up, I think it's important to set your vision, right? As a business,
Yeah.
what's your goal? And what are you trying to achieve? And not to, you know, I think the mistake a lot of people can make especially when they're first starting out, is focusing on too much data, right? I think like we said before, there's a lot of data out there. So I think, looking at just some of the core metrics, traffic, orders, conversions, and just start there. And then from there, you can really dive in. Okay, where's my traffic coming from? Is it are my consumers mobile centric? All right, I need to think about how I have a really great optimized mobile site. Are my users using Apple Pay or Google Pay or PayPal? Do my users want new payment options, right? Like Affirm or Afterpay? And those are some of the questions that you can then start asking just by looking at some of those simple metrics like conversion and traffic and orders. And then you can dive down deeper into those. I think it's important not to get too hung up on all of the fancy ways in which you can analyze data.
Yeah, right. And it's really like being realistic about what we want and having like a couple of clear questions that we could answer and then take it from there based on our objectives and what we want from our data. Because as you said, sometimes we have answers to beautiful things, but that we cannot like do in our business or never meet and with our current business model. So it's really important to keep our feet on the ground, like when it comes to data, right?
Exactly. And I think it's important too to not let your own biases influence the way you read the data.
Yeah,
Your
right.
customers are telling you something. Listen to them. Don't take your own conceived notions of how you want your business or your customer to do, how you want them to operate, how you want them to behave.
Yeah.
Listen to them. Don't impose your beliefs on your customer.
Yeah, you've obviously worked with a lot of entrepreneurs, I think, and you've had your share. Yeah, because yeah, it's true. Sometimes we have like this subjective point of view. I mean, it's good that an entrepreneur knows what he wants and where he wants to get, but sometimes the answers or the route that he should take is that projected by the customers and not by us. I mean, the finality is there, but there are sometimes ways that our customers demand we take because it's easier for them and not for us. It's important that we think about it that way. Thank you for pointing it out.
You're welcome. It's so true. It's so true.
Oh my God. Kaila, are there any other things that really we need to be aware of or like concepts that we should just look at the beginning and in relation to this data-driven world and decision making?
I think we're entering into a brave new world of data and decision making. I think, as a business, it's exciting from my perspective. I think there's an evolution of data, how we use data, how we leverage it, how we monetize it. It's exciting. So I think the number one goal that every organization should keep in mind when they're looking at their data is to remain, just like we said, remain customer-centric, customer-focused. And you have a vision for your business, but ultimately the customer is in the driver's seat in a lot of ways. So use their feedback, use their data to help deliver a better experience to them. And I think that's ultimately going to get you where you want to be, whether you're a small business or a huge retailer. It's a really exciting time, in my opinion, for retail because, especially what happened over the past year with the pandemic, it's accelerated so many trends and digital behavior and digital adoption. And I think that's so cool. Like we're seeing so many so much innovation happening right now, which is exciting. And so I think we all need to embrace that. And we're seeing consumers embrace it at just a rapid pace. So,
right.
Continually evolve with your consumer, measure, reassess, retest. It's not one straight path, like you were saying. There's going to be lots of twists and turns. So be open-minded to that and go with the flow in that regard. And yeah, I just think it's an exciting new world, and it's awesome.
Thank you so much, Caila, and thank you for putting it in this beautiful and simple way, because sometimes we need to de-stress and just focus and go with the flow, and things will be revealed eventually, I believe.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Carla, for this beautiful chat and talk. And I hope that we managed to answer all of the questions that we hope to talk about today. Is there anything that you would like to add and that I didn't ask about?
No, I have to say your questions were amazing. And
Thank
again, I'm
you.
so grateful to you that you invited me here today to
Thank
speak to
you.
your audience. And I hope we get to work together at some point in the future.
I hope so too. Thank you so much. And I wish you a beautiful day and weekend.
You too.
For those who joined a little bit later, I will be posting this chat on IGTV and later on YouTube. And for those who would like to join you, Kyla, how could they do it? It's via Instagram, or are there any other addresses that we should be looking at?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. I'm also on Twitter at Caila Schwartz, just one word. And then I'm also on Clubhouse. If any of you are on Clubhouse, you can find me there as well. And so we're hosting lots of great Twitter spaces and Clubhouse events. We're gearing up for a holiday, building out some holiday predictions. So we're going to put together what we think are going to be some of the key things that we're going to have to look out for this holiday season. So if you're interested in that, follow along. We're going to be coming out with some cool data in the next few weeks.
Yay, perfect. It feels like Christmas already. I mean, for
Oh, yeah.
retailers and for me.
It never ends for me.
Thank you so much, so much, so much. It was a pleasure. And speak soon and meet soon.
Absolutely. Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye. You
Bye.
too. Bye.